Hi guys, Brand here, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the developer update, the Dead by Daylight good old behavior, recently released because no matter what video I release tomorrow, there's going to be questions about how I feel about all the new data that has come out in the developer update. So might as well just make a whole video talking about it because, well, that's what we're going to be talking about anyway. Even if I release a different topic, there'll be questions about that. So might as well just, talk about it right now. So let's go ahead and talk about it. This dev update is quite different than the other dev updates. Usually with the dev updates, they talk about map reworks, character changes, stuff like that, hints in the new chapter, stuff like that. But in this one, they've just kind of done a stat dump. We haven't had a release of a lot of data like kill rates, killer picks, stuff like that. We haven't had something like that in years at this point. It's been a while since Behavior has released their own data. Obviously, we have fan sites like Nightlight that kind of track that stuff through fan submission, but obviously there's a discrepancy there because that is fan submission. It's not actually firm numbers tracked by Behavior. It's just us as a community doing our best to track those numbers. That's Behavior just does not endow us with this information very often, but they have updated the stats a bit, and there's a lot of things here that kind of disprove and a lot of things that people have been saying about the game lately, and things have been things that have made people upset about the game lately. So it's kind of interesting to see what the stats actually are, as opposed to the way upset content creators and upset gamers and players out in the community seem to perceive things. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the updated stats. Okay, so the first thing we're going to be talking about is the killer pick rate. So actually, which killers are being played the most. There are your usual suspects here like Huntress, Wraith, Legion, Wesker, who is famously most often held the most played character in the game title for a little bit there. But the one that you probably may or may not have seen coming here is that Chucky is actually the most played character in the game. And I think it's pretty evident why, because Chucky, for a lack of a way to put it nicer, is just kind of like one of the most pay to win, very, very easy to play characters in the game for how good he is. Chucky is very, very oppressive, especially when it boils down to the scamper thing, where if like you just drop a pallet, he just slides right under it and hits you anyway. Chucky's not that hard to play and not that hard to get the most value out of. And, human beings in general kind of like the path of least resistance. That's just our nature. So that includes when it comes to games. So if we find a killer in Dead by Daylight that can win with very little resistance, we're going to go for that. It's not like Nurse, like Blight, like Spirit, where even if they are very, very oppressive, you have to put in at least some effort to reach a slightly higher than average skill floor to be able to just demolish teams. Chucky kind of does all the things that these characters do in terms of their overwhelming pressure with not at all the same level of input, which is another reason you see Wraith so high up here, because Wraith, despite not being like an A tier character, he gets a lot of value for very, very little input. His map traversal literally happens in the background while you're cloaked with the built-in windstorm. His lunge is very nice, not as good as it was in the PTB when they first changed him, but you have a nice lunge. So a lot of slowdown also synergizes with you because of your fast movement and your good map traversal. So a lot of Wraith is kind of like autopilot-y, which is something you're going to see a trend in another one of these charts we look at. But a lot of autopilot killers that don't take a lot of input but give you a lot of result typically err on the more popular side. So obviously two out of the top 3 most played killers obviously fall under this. Even Huntress to some extent has a fairly low skill floor because chasing as a 110 killer is melee killer is not the greatest, but hatchets, if you only throw them when they're very, very confirmed, like they're vaulting over a pallet or something, there's something to be said for not needing the extra shots, at least until you get into higher MMR. Yeah, it's not really a surprise to me that Chucky's at the top of here. And for all those people that are saying, well, if they just nerf Scamper, it'll be okay. Well, Scamper's tied to the achievement in the game, and they would have to change the achievements across all the different platforms, which is a gargantuan challenge. So Scamper will be changed maybe, but they're not going to take that out. So that's a whole different video that's talking about like Chucky and how I feel about Chucky. But like in terms of the high pick rate, it makes sense to me. Just me vault under a pallet, me win chase for free. Why not? Okay, so for our next chart is the one that's probably the most controversial one and the one that you probably want me to talk about the most, and that being the deadliest killers, so the killers that have the highest kill rate across all MMRs, and that top 3 being Skull Merchant, Sadako, and Pinhead being the top 3. And with that, I want to say that very, very clearly and poignantly, the reason I believe this in, and by the way, first off, before we get into this, DCs are not included in these lists. DCs are not included in these lists, so those don't count as kills, but giving on hope does count. Giving up on hook does count. And I feel like what I have noticed in the top 3 here in terms of something that's common among them is A, they're very, very good at pump stomping. And if you're wondering what I mean by that, it's like if you're not a 4-man on Swift and communicating, which not a high amount of the player base actually is on comms and playing together, these characters really, really benefit from a lack of coordination. So obviously they kind of like plow that way too. But also, these characters are, once again, like I told you to remember for later, a lot of these characters are very, very autopilot or very, very easy to get a lot of value out of. With Skull Merchant, you just put up the drones and survivors get passively injured with little to no way to avoid that besides Wing away. And obviously that's very RNG based on what was available for you to W away to, away from wherever you happen to be under the drone. Sadako obviously very infamously at the beginning reworked over and over and over again because people despise facing her because she is so flowcharty and is so samey match to match, where it comes to her just spamming teleport to get as many stacks as possible really, really quickly. It seemed like we kind of came to some sort of consensus that that was bad, and then they nerfed her, but people complained that she was too weak now, so they gave her back a lot of her abilities with being able to spam teleport, and now it's creating kind of the same issue all over again. And it's just like, for whatever reason, they can't seem to get this character right. But one thing that this character very consistently seems to retain is their ability to build all those stacks and condemn and kill people with very, very little effort. With very, very little effort. So if you could buy a character and you could just spam the teleport button and get a lot of kills, why wouldn't you? If you could buy a character and all you have to do is throw drone up and get free injuries, why wouldn't you? Pinhead is kind of slightly more of an outlier. He errs more on the side of what I said with the pub stomping, where it's hard to coordinate to defeat a Pinhead unless you are in a full group. But even Pinhead, to some extent, most of his kit is kind of easy when it comes to the box hunting. If you don't know how the box hunt works, you kind of lose out on a lot of your pressure. But once you understand that it's okay, well, it's a big radius around me where it can't spawn and a tiny radius around the survivors where it can't spawn, that 40 meter to 16 meter difference, then you search all the negative space in between and you call it a day. And once you understand that, that's it. So one of your most oppressive global pressure tools out of most characters in the game, once you figure that out, it's more of a knowledge check. It's not actually difficult. So once you know that, it's actually pretty easy to get a lot of constant chain huts going. Obviously, the outlier being if it's a 4-man Swift, they will shut down the box fairly easily because once you're in a team that's on comms, you can figure out who's rotating the box and kind of undo that macro pressure. So it kind of errs more on the side of the skill being in the actual chains and throwing the M2 to try and make chase as short as possible. Whereas like the box logic, which is arguably the strongest part of his kit, is actually super simple. And once you understand it, you can kind of just freely pub stop teams as you wish. I think another thing that's very similar about all of these killers is it's mostly comes down to a knowledge check, right? Like with Sadako, it's how do I get rid of this condemned? Should I get rid of the tape before the permanent lock? What is a permanent lock? Does a permanent lock even exist? Do I even know that as a fairly new player? And kind of capitalizing the fact that players may not know about how the condensed system works. And even if you're a more experienced player, well, they keep changing the character every fucking patch. So some people that don't play the game every fucking day may not know what this character does because they keep fucking changing it. So like, what are you supposed to do? So obviously that's going to lead to a lot of deaths because people, even the people that play this game not every day, but just semi-often, may not know how Sadako works and how to counterplay against her. Skull Merchant is like more of the idea of like, I don't know how to counterplay somebody just throwing up a drone and calling it a day. I'm just eating the free injury. Like, of course I can W key away, but I don't know if like there is a tile next to me to W key away too when it's a good time to take down the drone or not worry about it and just run by the drone. Obviously, this is another character that if you're on comms, you can have somebody like hold the drone while you run through and stuff like that. But once again, need comms, you need voice comms, and to be in a group, a full 4-man to kind of put down a lot of that stuff. Obviously, with Pinhead, there's stuff that's still not explained in the game, like the getting the chains before you solve the box. Obviously, you have to dodge chains before you start doing the box solve, or else the chains will continue to interrupt you while you're doing the box solve. The way the environmental chains work, if you break a chain on the environment, another chain spawns and does all that. There's a lot of knowledge checks for these characters that unless you play this game every single day, watch content creators every single day, you're not going to exactly know what to do against these characters. So as a result, since this is all MMRs and all players, you're going to keep running into situations where people don't particularly know what what this character does, and if they even play semi-frequently, and what this version of this character, because they keep changing things so much and not for the better, they don't know what this specific version of the character does. So I think those three factors combine into just kind of this nasty mess of people generally not knowing how to survive against these killers. This last thing that I want to talk about is the survival rate in groups thing, because I always find this very funny, because the big boogeyman for killers in Dead by Daylight is always the 4-man Swift on comms, and this tickles me a lot that according to these stats that Beaver released in terms of total MMR among survivors, 4-man on comms, or 4-man in general, it doesn't specify on comms, but a lot of people who play 4-mans do play on comms because they're playing with their friends, only 3% better. Only 3% better than the average solo queue player, duo, trio. Only 3% better. That I got a lot of crap in my recent video where I was talking about the outside advantages thing, talking about how the Discord aspect of things was only a moderate advantage and not a major advantage, and I got a lot of flack for that in the comments. So it's only 3% better. Hi, how's it going? How are you? Do you have a follow-up for that, or would we like to talk about it, or are you just not gonna be mean on this one? I don't know, kind of funny. Where we boil down to, though, where this actually does matter, is that in high MMR, so where a general most of the player base is not, it is actually almost a 10% difference. That I will point out, that I will give you, is that if in the high MMR, where not a majority of the players are, there is almost a full 10% difference, from 39% to 48%. So when it comes to the cream of the crop, the tip of the top, yeah, being a 4-man, presumably on comms, does matter a lot, and grouping does matter more at high MMR. But in the general player base, the people that play this game casually or semi-frequently, 4-man on comms is not the massive advantage that you make it out to be. I'm not saying it doesn't give an advantage. Obviously, I said it gives a moderate advantage. Even in that outside advantages video, I'm like, it gives a moderate advantage. But I think what these stats go to show us is that, yeah, these advantages are overblown and usually are kind of boy cry wolf situations of people trying to blame their losses on something that's not necessarily going to be always the reason that they did lose. If we're going to be looking to fix things in Dead by Daylight, I'm looking at like dumb stuff that's in the game that probably shouldn't be there, like brand new parts, styptics, syringes, stuff like that. I'm looking at something outside like Discord. As you're saying, it does not have as pervasive an effect as it has been exaggerated to be by content creators that don't like losing, or by players in general, just the community in general, who don't like losing and want to blame it on something and scapegoat something. So there it is. There's the numbers. Numbers don't lie. And that sucks. Well, that was the end of the dev update. There's obviously a lot of really, really spicy stuff in there that kind of like shed some not so great light on a lot of very, very interesting takes the Dead by Daylight community has. What did you guys think of the dev update? What surprised you, and what kind of made more sense? Let me know down in the comments below. But that's it for today's video, friends. Thank you so much for watching, but I do upload daily, so I will see you tomorrow. But if I do not, I will see you when I see you. Goodbye.